Hey everyone, welcome back to Ontario Gardening. So today it is our first week of our fall-inspired farm-to-table meals. Week 1, we are going to do a pumpkin bread. So this is actually a Starbucks Copycat recipe, and it's all in one bowl, so that makes life so easy. So I'm going to actually put the recipe in the underneath in the description. This way you know exactly what you need. But just to let you know, you need 3 large eggs. So I'm using my quail eggs here from the Homestead. 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. And if you don't have farm to table ingredients and you just have regular ingredients from the store, that works too. So 3 large eggs, 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. I make my own, but you can also use canned. 2/3 cup of any sunflower oil or mild flavored oil. I personally am going to use butter in lieu of oil. It's always going to taste better and have that richer flavor. Plus it's homemade. So we're going to do the the butter instead of oil. 1 cup of white sugar. 1/2 cup of light brown sugar. If you don't have light brown sugar, just use the regular brown sugar that you have on hand. 2 teaspoons of vanilla or vanilla extract if you have that. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 1.5 cups of all-purpose white flour. And then for the topping of the bread, you're going to want 3 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds. So I have mine here. I got dry roasted and salted because that's what I like, but 3 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds, 1 teaspoon of either honey or maple syrup, which we have here, and 1/2 teaspoon again of any sunflower oil or light oil. And again, I will be using butter for that. So this is a 1 bowl recipe, like I said. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. And now you're going to spray your baking pan with cooking spray or line it with butter, however that looks, to oil your pan. The recipe calls for a 9 by 5 inch loaf pan. I'm just using my big loaf pan here. It'll cook the same. Now we're going to put our 3 large eggs into a big bowl and whisk them up well. Once you have whisked up your eggs nicely, we're going to add in whatever oil you're using. I'm using melted butter. Then you're going to add both of your sugars, which is 1 cup of white and 1/2 cup of the light brown. So I got that 1/2 cup of brown, my cup of white, and now we're actually going to add the 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I have made my own, but if you have extract, that works too. And now we're just going to mix this all together until it's a nice smooth mixture. It really doesn't take too much legwork to incorporate this all, really. Okay, now at this point, when it's nice and smooth, we are going to add our spices. So we are looking for that 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and the 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, and we're just going to sprinkle it right on top of this mixture. The other thing you're going to want to do is to sprinkle the baking soda and the baking powder and the salt, so the last 3 little ingredients, over top of your mixture. So again, it's 1 teaspoon of the baking soda, and then 3/4 of the baking powder and 3/4 of salt. I'm actually not putting salt personally in this because I use salted butter as my oil base, but 3/4 teaspoon of salt if you used any other type of oil. And again, you're just gonna want to incorporate all of that into this. And a lot of the spice is going to collect on the sides of the bowl. You wanna just really make sure you're bringing that wet mixture up and scraping that all off the sides. All of your flavor is coming from this mixture here. I wish you guys could smell this. It smells amazing. So now the last ingredient for the actual bake itself is 1.5 cups of flour into this. And we're just going to stir this flour in until it's incorporated. You don't have to over stir, just make sure it disappears into this mixture. And when you're done mixing, it's going to look like this. Now you want to transfer this into our pan and we'll make the topping. Okay, and you just want to smooth that out and make it even inside of your pan. Okay, now for the topping on this bad boy. So we are going to need 3 tablespoons of those pumpkin seeds, a teaspoon of honey or maple syrup, whatever you have on hand. If you're using honey, I would just microwave it a little bit just to make it a little bit thinner, but I'm using maple syrup. I prefer the taste for this recipe. So I'm gonna go ahead and use a teaspoon of that. And then the other part of this was half a teaspoon of any light flavored oil. I'm going in again with butter, just melted butter. I prefer that over oil in a baking recipe if possible. You're gonna go ahead and just mix this around. And then you're going to, once it is all nice and incorporated, we're just spreading this on top of this. And just do the best that you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just looking for a little bit of crunch and pumpkin seed on each slice of bread when it does come out. And that is it. Now this step for baking is important. You're gonna wanna put this on a baking sheet that has a piece of tin foil on top. And the reason that we're doing this is for 2 reasons. Depending on your pan size, once this starts to bake, it's possible that it comes over a bit. It probably won't, but the other option, or the other reason we do this is because we're gonna check it at the 45-minute mark, and if we're finding that it is too brown on the top but still raw in the middle, you can actually fold the tin foil over and make a tent so that it stops burning on the top, similar to like a pie crust. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in the oven for a total of 55 to 65 minutes. But we are gonna check at that 45 minute mark to just make sure that the top is not burning. We don't want burnt pumpkin seeds on the top of this. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop it in, and we will see you in 40 or 45 minutes to check to see how we're doing. So in the chaos of life, I actually forgot to add my pumpkin puree to my pumpkin bread. That would make so much sense as to why it is the way that it is. So just make sure when you are doing the oil and eggs and spices, that's the time that you want to add your pumpkin puree. I'm gonna go in afterwards and add it and hope that it turns out. I'm sure it'll be fine, but that's when you wanna make those changes to the recipe. That looks much better. So I'm gonna have pumpkin seeds inside of my bread now that weren't supposed to be there, but that's okay. So we're gonna make a new topping, throw that on. See you guys in 40 minutes. Okay, so here is the finished bread. I am just waiting for this to cool, and then we're gonna cut into it for you guys. You want some pumpkin loaf? Look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, guys. Happy spooky season. See you next week for a different fall recipe from Farm to Table.